Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Null Knives Raiden Pocketknife. Very, very interesting piece, and looking forward to spending some time checking one out. But first off, before I go any further, I want to thank Null Knives for sending this prototype knife along. Actually, what happened is my buddy Levon from the Knife Nuts podcast reached out to me, said, "Hey Nick, this is really good. You should probably check one of these guys out." So I reached out, dude. I sent him my full disclaimer on my website, told him I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. Might be a gem, it might be junk. He did still send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, all the more so because it is a prototype, and I am doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison real quick. First, here it is against the Spyderco Delica and the Ontario Rat 2, and what we're going to see is this knife is a little bit larger than both of those, although in the handle, actually, it's not all that much substantially bigger, right? This is a very medium-sized knife. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2. And then actually here it is against a ruler. We're going to see here that measuring charitably, we are coming in right around maybe 3.5, 3.3 inches or so worth of blade length. And then finally a size comparison, which will assure that all other size comparisons are null and void. Okay, anyways, there you go. That, of course, being the shot by design void, another great knife. So there you go. Next thing, what the heck is Null Knives? Well, Null Knives is a company that is brand new. It's run by a guy, he's a design engineer, which is not honestly shocking, but who has always enjoyed drawing and been a knife geek for a while, but decided to try his hand at designing a new knife. And this is the result here. The Raiden is the very first one. This knife is going to be a pre-order based knife. And the pre-order is starting apparently on January 26th at the time of filming. And of course, caveat emptor, right? If you are risk averse, you should probably wait for them to be in stock. I'm not personally endorsing this, nor stating that I know the guy to be trustworthy. I am just talking about the knife that is on my table here. I'll be pre-ordering personally. If something goes wrong, well, I'm in the same boat. But as with all pre-orders from a brand new maker, there is some risk, and weigh that carefully as you make your decision. The other thing that's worth noting is that this right here is a prototype knife. In fact, if you look on the inside of it here, you'll see that it says Proto 1 down in the bottom there. So I am reviewing this guy because, well, honestly, even if it were unchanged, even if the prototype was the same version that was released to the public, my opinion on it actually would be the same, right? And they've stated that there will be a couple of changes, actually. He sent with it a list of things that need to be revised and whatnot. But among them, he's talking about changing the thumb stud here. The finger choil is going to be a little bit larger over here. Well, sharpening choil, finger choil, a little of each. They're going to further lower the weight in the back here. The jimping is going to be a little bit more hardcore. And they're working on the thickness behind the edge, which honestly isn't that bad to start with. But this little prototype here is going to head back to the maker afterwards. So there's that. And then finally, in terms of the actual knife, there are 3 different configurations. There's this guy here for $289. There's one that is a satin blade with a black DLC handle and bronze accents for $300. And then there's an acid wash with black handle for also $300. You can buy other hardware for $10. So that's about the price here. It's $290 or $300, right? Depending on which version you'd like and how much you like the color black. So, or lack of color? Not sure. Null color? Anyways, so let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife right here. On the good side, price-wise, it's okay. It could absolutely be cheaper, sure, and I'd hate to see it go up much, but I gotta be honest with you, even at $290, $300, this is pretty good because the details are there. The execution is great. I mean, there's a lot of competition at this kind of price range, and that's why it's okay. But at the same time, it's quite good. And this would have been a $500 knife a few years ago, and it'd be $1,200 if you put a couple of brand logos there. So at some level, I can't really get bent out of shape, right? This is a very good knife, and the price is, it's high, but I don't feel like they're ripping me off here. The price is sort of okay. Next thing, and something that is not just okay, is the size. This is a nice size, right? This just over 3 and like 3 1/4-ish size is very, very good because it's enough cutting power to do pretty much anything. And it gives you enough, especially if you choke up a little bit, but even fully on the handle. I get a 4-finger grip with my given relatively small hands. This is just a very, very good size, and it's still very compact in the pocket. It's nice. There's just a lot to like about this knife right here, I gotta say. Next thing, clip on this guy is good. It's a sculpted clip. It has a, it is sculpted. Sorry, it's a sculpted clip. It is sculpted. See, this is why you come to my channel, for the hard-hitting details here. But more importantly, it is a screwless design, is what I wanted to say, the other S word. And despite it being kind of right over this area here, honestly, it's not particularly hard to use. It's not hard to get into and out of the pocket. The stiffness is just right. Really nailed the clip right out the bat, which I got to say, I do appreciate it. It is, however, righty-only pocket knife. There is no way to flip this clip over to the other side, so do keep that in mind. So there you go. Next thing, disassembly on this guy was easy. This was a 7-minute disassembly, and that's great, right? Because it's T8 all around on here, and it was just very, very straightforward. There was really nothing to worry about disassembly-wise, and that's stellar. By the way, with a non-free spinning pivot, which I appreciate too. Next thing, ergonomically speaking, this is sort of a weird knife ergonomically, in that when you grip it, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, there's a lot going on, but if I bear down on it really hard, there really aren't odd spots particularly, you know, and you can do it in two different ways. You can choke up a little bit with your index finger here, or you can come back a little bit more. It's weirdly ergonomically good, and it has a little bit of extra width in the back here, a little extra junk in the trunk to fit well in the hands. I gotta say, ergonomically, like, there's a lot here. You can feel a number of elements, but they aren't actually hot spotty, and that's kind of impressive to me. It's very ergonomically strange in that way. You can also see, by the way, that the scales here are very much rounded, right? This is not a flat knife. Instead, there is kind of a hump to it, and as a result, it fills the palm a little bit better than you might expect. So I kind of looked at this and thinking, oh, that's going to have the ergonomics of a bag of hornets, but in reality, it turned out to be pretty much fine. It's busy, you feel a lot there, and it's not something that's smooth and rounded like some of the other stuff out there, but it's still pretty good. Next thing, design-wise, honestly, I just find it attractive. I think it's a very pretty knife. And it's got a lot of stuff going for it, too. It's got nice lines overall. It's got a little bit of harpoon to it. And just overall, I think it's relatively minimal, but at the same time, there's enough there to make it feel unique and different, and a little bit lightning-y, which kind of makes sense with the whole Raiden theme. That's good, but more importantly, putting the large-scale aesthetics aside, there were a lot of little tiny details on this, and I'll kind of zoom in a little bit and show them off. I mean, to start with, the clip here has no screw in it, right? There is no external screw holding this clip on. This guy goes through the other side and into the clip, which is nice. And while we're here, this right here is a lanyard hole. You can't see it, now you see it. Nice. That's a good detail. If you look on the inside of the knife during the disassembly, you would see, for instance, that there is a lock bar insert, which you can actually see the screw for right here, and in the middle there, complete with ceramic detent ball, all those kinds of things, as well as serving as an over-travel stop, which one really can't argue with. The blade itself has a detent ball ramp, which you might be able to see while the knife is, yeah, that little dude right there, that's a little ramp for the detent ball to get back onto the knife. That's a beautiful thing. The lock bar itself, when you are going to open it, has this little bit of knurling right in here, which makes it much easier to grab hold of. It's a little tiny thing, but it's kind of a nice detail here. It is using T8 screws all around with stainless screws here, which is a beautiful thing. And honestly, it's just, it's very, very nicely done. All of those little tiny details. Oh, and by the way, the internal milling is huge. If you watch the disassembly video, I'll see if I can show it to you. Keep throwing stuff around my desk here, but I'll show it to you on the inside here. But you can see they have done a lot of effort to remove material on the inside of the knife, and apparently they're going to do a little bit more removal down the road. But that internal milling is very nice and helps make this guy a little bit lighter than it otherwise would have been. So I like that very much. And so the details are definitely there. This is a knife where it's clear the designer has put a lot of thought into it. Next thing, this has a great blade. And actually, last thing in the good, this has a great blade. It is an M390 blade, and it's got a nice design with a little bit of flat here, some belly, a nice tip here. It has that nice harpoon to it with a bit of a swedge at the top as well. It is a very practical shape, and you know what? It adds a little bit of extra style with that swedge here. It's nice. It is just a very nice, and it's got a reasonably thin grind here. We mentioned in the paper, in the thing that they're going to try and thin the edge out a little further, and sure, that'd be great, but honestly, it's not bad to start with. So this is actually a surprisingly nice little knife here. And by the way, it looks thicker than it is because they screwed up the sharpening down at the bottom here. So we'll talk about that in a second. So anyways, it is is just a very nice blade. And carrying this guy, using this guy, was just like, wow, this is a good knife. And so to me, all of that is the good, is that it is a great blade, lots of details, a good overall design, solid ergonomics, despite it not looking like it would have solid ergonomics. It has easy disassembly, a very nice size, and the price here feels okay. And so that's good. On the great side to me, and I went back and forth as to whether the blade or the action was going to be the great here, but I just chose action because honestly, this is a great action, right? It is running on bearings and it is using thumb studs here, but it has a great to 10. Absolutely 100% reliable deployment. Very, very quick because it's on bearings. It's a nice, easy deploy. It is a very smooth closure. It's not as dangerous. It has a very, very strong, has a very smooth action, but it's not, oh my God, fall shutty, which on a thumb stud knife is actually in many ways preferable just because there's not a flipper tab to catch the finger there. So that little bit of extra slowness is actually not a problem here. And it's a very satisfying thwack when you open it up. Oh, yeah. This is a great action. And every time I carried the knife, it was just like, oh, yeah, that's good. So this has a really, really nice action. And to me, I think that's what the great is. On the bad side, to start with the factory. The factory here, I asked Null Knives, what's the factory? And they said they are actually forbidden from sharing the name of the factory. And indeed, he didn't tell me that. But the thing is, he didn't need to. This particular factory repeatedly puts designers in this bad position over and over again when making lower cost pieces. And to be honest, it angers me, and we all know who it is, because we never does this to designers. Bestech doesn't do this to designers. Kaiser Concept, Kube, Tuya, and Tucson do not do this, and honestly, parts of this knife even feel like this particular factory's work. And so that may leave you to go, who the heck could it be? Look, we all know. Null is just following the terms of the contract to work with a well-known and well-reputed maker, but it's insulting that this company keeps thinking they're being sneaky by making their lower-cost knives not able to use their factory name. And, okay, sure thing, right? They are not being sneaky here. This is like you're riding in an elevator with one other person. They fart loudly and claim they don't know who did it. Like, okay, yeah, sure thing. Your secret is safe over there, factory. So anyways, Mystery Factory, this is dumb. Stop. And if anything, these lower-cost pieces demonstrate your skill for a market who can't always afford to go higher up, and give people a taste of why they might be interested in your more high-end collaborations. No one's being fooled anyways, so just freaking drop it and let makers be transparent as they should be. So anyways, that's not about the knife, but damn it, that factory is really dumb for doing that over and over again. Next thing, moving on to things that are actually about the knife, one thing I noticed is that there is no branding on this knife here at all, right? The only written words on it are M390, and to be fair, it's M390, but at the same time, it's a little weird. Is that like a null pun? That there's null branding? I don't know, but it's a thing, and it might be a little bit weird for somebody who gets this down the road and has no idea what they're looking at here. Next thing, ergonomically, I mentioned that it is very good in the hand compared to what you might expect, but it is still very busy. There are still a lot of elements to it, and, as you're choking up here, you're going to feel various things in your hand. There are knives that have the ergonomics of a river rock, right, where it's perfectly smooth. This is something that actually, it feels fine in the hand, but there's just a lot going on. So if your preference is for super smooth, rounded, grippable handles, this might not be what you're after, but like I said, the ergos aren't bad. They're just kind of complicated, if that makes sense. It makes up good ergonomics by virtue of like 50 surfaces. So not the end of the world, but it's a thing to consider. Next thing, the balance on this guy is a little bit further back than I might like to see. The balance ends up being around here. Now, mind you, they had talked in Null talks in his little briefing, so to speak, that additional milling will be going on in the back here, and that would shift the balance, generally speaking, a little bit more forward, and that's a nice thing. But at the same time, hopefully that'll be fixed a little bit. Balance is a little farther back. Next thing, the pivot on this guy, I'm not honestly convinced by. I'll put it in there. What I mean by that is just like design-wise, it's fine. I see where they're going. But because of the nature of how, this is beveled, one side of this pivot looks a lot bigger than the other side, and so it looks asymmetrical. It looks like it doesn't really rest in there. And honestly, this kind of knurling thing just doesn't make much sense to me, right? To me, this is the one design choice they made here that I'm just like, probably not. I feel like just a smooth pivot would have fit the smooth surface of the knife more generally speaking. This is mostly aesthetic, but it just ends up looking very weird when it's done in this particular way. Not the end of the world, but not a big fan of that. Next thing, while I'm zoomed in here, I'll go ahead and show you. If we look at the very bottom of the blade here, This guy is not sharpened at the very, very tip here. This is not a knife where it is dangerous in the back, right? There are some knives that leave that unsharpened because the knife is too close. I really couldn't touch that even if it were fully sharpened. That's not a concern. In fact, this little bit of extra rise here is a nice detail to help with that. I suspect actually that it is related to the fact that the thumb studs are relatively long, right? And that is making it harder to sharpen this out. And this is, to be fair, a common issue I've seen from knives made by other overseas factories. Specifically, Rayon has done this a lot before. So it seems that whoever the mystery maker is has that same problem. Weird. But the larger choil that is mentioned in the description should be able to fix that, right? That will kind of push this out of there and make that a little bit easier. Next thing, actually, speaking of the thumb studs, to me, the thumb studs are a little bit too tall. It's not huge, right? I've had knives on the table where it's just like, oh my God, this thumb stud is gigantic. But this is something that should be revised. And indeed, the designer is already planning to revise that, making them a little bit shorter and a little bit wider, which I think will actually make them both a little bit more comfortable and make them carry a little bit more comfortably. It's very possible, especially given their prominence over the sort of what's in the area, it's very possible that this might snag on your pocket or something like that, whereas a wider thumb stud that is a little bit shorter might not. So that was definitely sort of my biggest issue with this particular knife and prototype here. But that is another thing that's going to be fixed. And so getting to the end of it, it's actually worth pointing out that the only issues that are not addressed as of the time of as of the time of filming in the future version, is the pivot not really working particularly well for me. The fact that it is still very busy ergonomically, even if it's fine, and the factory thinking that they're being sneaky when they really aren't. So to me, all of that is the bad, but all of that's going to be revised away, right? The thumb studs are a little tall, which should be fixed. The heel is unsharpened, which should be fixed. The pivot, the balance, that should be fixed too. It's ergonomically busy. It's unbranded, and it is, well, we already had that rant. On the ugly front, there's really nothing ugly here, right? That this is overall a pretty great knife, which actually brings me to my final conclusion, which is that this is perplexingly good, right? Like, after I got this guy in hand, it was like, whoa. And I think I even DM'd the Null guy and asked, like, flat out, is this really your first knife design? Like, I know that there are people in the industry who've been designing in-house for companies before, and then they break off on their own, and suddenly no, apparently this is just his first thing, right? Because this is surprisingly good out of the gate. That was shocking to me, because it has a price that's fine, a nice size, easy disassembly, good ergos, good design, a ton of good details, a great blade, and a really, really nice action. I am still bothered by the factory being transparently opaque, if that makes sense. It's a little bit ergonomically busy still. Pivot is still kind of and there are plans to resolve the rest of the issues here, but honestly, this is good, because so often, when you get one of these collaborations where a designer works with an overseas factory, or a local factory for that matter, but first-time designers and factories collaborating tend to be shallowly excellent, if that makes sense. You look at them on Instagram and they're like, oh yeah, it looks pretty attractive. But then you get it in hand, you start using it, you start treating it like a pocket knife, and it falls apart in the details. This is where the gap is between pretty design and good design. And there are designers who make pretty knives that aren't good, and designers who make good knives that aren't pretty, and relatively few people who do both, right? Or at least that's one of the things that separates a good designer from a great one, in my mind. And this actually, I feel like, does both, right? This has all of the little details that so often add together to be big problems in these kinds of collaborations, and it's just really nice, combining the nice design with great build and details with a very clear eye to all of those little functional things that need to be right for the knife to be great, and then all of the little issues with it, well, they've already got plans to resolve, and in writing that came to me in the package with the freaking prototype. Like, that's impressive, right? This is a knife that is shallowly excellent, as many of these things are, but it's deeply excellent, though. And it's very clear that the guy has overthought everything he should have. And if this is the guy's first knife design, then I am very hopeful about number 2 and number 3, right? This is going to be great. Again, I want to state, this is a prototype, right? And pre-orders are always a bet, and you should never bet money you can't lose. But honestly, this prototype, the knife that is on my table right now, putting aside any changes, if this was sent to me as this is the production knife and this is what people can buy, then honestly, this is a gem right now. This prototype is a gem. And assuming that the production ones have the stated improvements and are delivered as promised, they're going to be even shinier gems. And as a result, I was very, like at first I was like, yeah, sure, send it along. If it's good, if it's not, maybe I'll just do a stealth review, tell you about, and take a look at the final production. But this is good. I have no trouble recommending the prototype is a great, fancy, and well-done pocket knife. And if the final version's better, then no, that's better. And more importantly, I'm going to try and pick up one of my own, maybe even the Knife Nuts podcast version, because I'm a bit of a simp, what can I say? But anyways, this is a very, very, very nice knife. I'm getting a lot of good big picture stuff, a lot of good little picture stuff, and being made excellently by a group of completely anonymous individuals who we can never, ever know. But ultimately, Null Knives, well done. This is a really great first excursion into knife design. I'm very impressed by it, and I think this is absolutely something that bodes well for your future time in the industry. And I suspect that you all, once you get one in hand, you're going to find this Raiden shockingly good. You'll be all null set. You might zero in on this guy. Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting to you, and I'll go ahead and wrap it up before you file to have this review annulled. Okay, bye now.